Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.
This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're diving deep into the Quartet, right? Orchestrating the Second American Revolution by Joseph J. Ellis.
Yeah.
It's a look at that period between 1783 and 1789, after the Revolution, before the Constitution.
Right.
And we have excerpts from the book itself and some of his endnotes. What I thought was interesting is the way that Ellis argues that the real driving force in this period wasn't just economics or a simple class struggle, but rather those who wanted a strong, unified nation and those who thought power should stay with the states.
It's not so much rich versus poor, but more like, how should this new nation be structured?
Right.
And I think on one side you have, figures like Washington and Hamilton, who came out of the war with a very continental perspective.
Right.
They'd seen the states not working together.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have those who see the Articles of Confederation, which really emphasized state sovereignty.
Yeah.
That's the model.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, too, how Ellis challenges those traditional narratives about these guys.
Yeah.
He argues that they weren't just elites protecting their own interests.
Right.
Instead, he kind of paints them as driven by this desire to actually expand the meaning of the American Revolution.
To a national scale.
To a national scale.
He really challenges that progressive interpretation.
Yeah.
And he points out that, these men, and in particular this quartet, Washington, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, these were the guys who were instrumental in winning independence.
Right.
These weren't latecomers trying to grab power.
Yeah.
They were already there. Yeah. What I think is so interesting about the book is that he points out that this very concept of a unified American nation didn't really exist in the minds of most people at the time.
Yeah. It's almost as if they had to create the idea.
Yeah.
So the Articles of Confederation, which governed the nation during this time, what were the major weaknesses that led to this need for a second revolution, as he calls it?
Well, they were intentionally designed to create this kind of loose alliance of states.
Right.
Prioritizing state power over a strong central government.
Sure.
And it's very clear this comes out of this fear of replicating the kind of monarchy they had just overthrown.
Right.
But this decentralized structure created significant problems, right? There was a lack of national unity and inability to effectively address things like the nation's finances, its security.
Finances were a big one.
Huge.
You think of Robert Morris, who was superintendent of finance. He was brought in to try and fix things.
Right.
What a mess.
Yeah. And he faces an uphill battle, right? Morris has this very capitalist mindset. He's focused on establishing public credit, a sound financial system.
Right.
He really clashes with a lot of delegates, especially from the South, who see land as the true measure of wealth and who are very suspicious of financial manipulation.
It seems like such a fundamental difference.
Oh, it is.
In how they view wealth and the role of government.
Absolutely.
What's an example of where this plays out?
I think the Rhode Island impasse over the impost is a great example.
Okay.
Right. This is a proposed tax on imports, crucial for stabilizing national finances.
Right.
Rhode Island just says, no way. They see it as an infringement on state sovereignty, a dangerous step toward tyranny.
Right.
They ultimately block it, dealing a fatal blow to this impost plan.
So you've got this financial chaos, and then you have the issue of westward expansion.
Yes.
Which, again, seems to play into this whole tension between states' rights and national unity.
And it's important to understand Washington's perspective here.
Okay.
Washington saw westward expansion as a potential unifying force for this young nation.
Okay.
He believes that managing these vast territories required a unified national approach.
But the states weren't really on board with that, were they?
Well, under the Articles, they're largely left to their own devices when it comes to westward expansion, which leads to this kind of chaotic scramble for land.
Right.
Conflicting claims.
Wasn't there the Ordinance of 1784 that tried to address some of this?
Yeah, and the ordinance, largely shaped by Jefferson, was an attempt to create a system for governing the Western territories and eventually admitting them as states.
Okay.
But even with this legislation, that underlying tension between state and national control remains a problem.
Right, and it really put them in a precarious position.
Absolutely.
Not just domestically, but internationally.
Yeah, you've got John Jay serving as Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and he faces numerous setbacks.
Yeah.
And it all underscores the weaknesses of the Confederation Congress.
In what way?
He struggles to negotiate effectively with Great Britain, with Spain, because the Congress lacks the power to enforce compliance from the states.
Oh, I see. So he's trying to make these agreements.
But he can't guarantee that the states will actually uphold their end of the bargain.
Didn't they have a particular issue with Spain and the Mississippi River?
Oh, yeah. Spain controls the mouth of the Mississippi.
Right.
They're eager to exploit the Confederation's weakness by limiting American access to this really vital waterway.
Right.
And this creates huge tensions, especially for Western settlers who rely on the river for trade.
Yeah.
And you see, Jay's efforts to resolve the issue were constantly hampered by the inability of Congress to present a united front or to compel states to honor any agreements.
Yeah, it just shows how these weaknesses are playing out on multiple fronts.
Absolutely.
And it's so interesting how someone like Madison, who initially favored states' rights, evolves into this staunch advocate for a stronger national government.
And I think his Vices of the Political System document is this powerful indictment of the Articles. I mean, he really lays out very meticulously how this structure prevents effective governance, how it threatens the Union's survival. And I think that shift in his thinking is really critical to understanding how we get from the Articles to the Constitution.
And that's what we'll pick up next time.
Absolutely.
We'll explore the creation and ratification of the Constitution and how this quartet really shaped the American Republic.
Picking up where we left off, this Constitutional Convention of 1787.
Right.
It becomes this pivotal moment. I mean, the fate of the nation is hanging in the balance here.
Yeah.
55 delegates gathered in Philadelphia.
So did they come in with like a clear plan?
This is what Ellis really emphasizes.
Okay.
There was no predetermined plan.
Okay.
I mean, these men came from different states, different backgrounds.
Right.
They're bringing different visions of what this new government should look like.
Right.
What unites them is this growing sense that the Articles just weren't working.
It wasn't working.
And so the convention becomes this crucible.
Interesting.
Where these visions are clashing.
Right.
Compromises are forged.
And it was all done in secret, right?
Yeah.
Why was that?
Well, the secrecy, as Ellis points out, it allowed for more open and frank discussions.
I see.
Right. So the delegates could debate freely, explore different ideas, even change their positions.
Right.
Without fear of public scrutiny. Or backlash.
That makes sense.
Right. So it allowed for this more dynamic, ultimately productive process.
And through it all, that tension between those who wanted a strong national government and those who wanted to protect the states, that was always there.
Oh, absolutely.
Like front and center.
And it's in this context that I think Madison really shines.
Okay.
I mean, he's the intellectual powerhouse of this quartet.
Right.
He arrives at the convention armed with this deep understanding of political theory.
Yeah.
And a clear vision for a more effective government.
And he's the one who kind of comes up with the Virginia plan?
Yeah, he becomes the architect.
Right.
The Virginia plan really lays out the framework for a truly national government with these three branches.
Executive, legislative, judicial.
Exactly.
Which is pretty different from the Articles.
Right. It's a huge departure.
Yeah. So what were some of the key features of the Virginia plan?
Well, it proposed this bicameral legislature.
Okay.
Representation based on population.
So bigger states get more power.
Exactly.
Okay.
It also called for a strong national executive and a national judiciary, both lacking under the Articles.
Right.
And this structure was really aimed at creating a more unified, effective government.
Capable of addressing those national issues.
Finances, defense, interstate disputes.
Right.
I mean, it really set the stage for weeks of intense debate.
Wow. You mentioned that he was into political theory. What were some of those ideas that shaped the Constitution?
Well, one that I think is really interesting that emerges during the debates is this idea of filtration.
Filtration?
Yeah.
What's that?
This system of representation that was designed to refine and elevate the will of the people.
Okay.
Right? So the founders, they were wary of direct democracy.
Right.
They feared mob rule.
Yeah.
The potential for the government to be swayed by passions rather than reason.
Okay.
So it's not about silencing the voice of the people,
right,
but creating the system where their interests are represented in a more considered, deliberative way.
I see.
Think of it like a water filter.
Okay.
Right? The filter doesn't eliminate the water. It removes the impurities, making it cleaner and safer to drink.
Okay.
So filtration, in this context, it's about refining that will of the people, ensuring the government acts in the best interests of the nation.
So things like the Electoral College.
Precisely.
A bicameral legislature.
These mechanisms reflect a deliberate effort to balance that will of the people.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
With the need for considered decision-making.
Okay.
To safeguard against unchecked popular sentiment.
Interesting.
A way to ensure stability.
So after weeks of debate and compromise,
Right.
they produce this document.
Right.
The Constitution.
Right.
But then they have to get it ratified, right?
That's right.
So what happens then?
This is where I think the great debate really unfolds.
Okay.
Right. It's a battle for the hearts and minds of the American people.
Right.
And Ellis highlights these clever strategies that the Federalists employed to ensure the success of the Constitution.
Like what?
Well, for one, the fact that they adopted the label Federalists.
Federalists. Okay.
Even though technically both sides favored some form of a federal system,
Right.
It's brilliant branding.
Okay.
They position themselves as the champions of this balanced and effective government,
Right.
while their opponents are the anti-federalists, a much less appealing label.
Yeah, less appealing.
And they recognize the power of a coordinated media campaign.
So how do they get their message across?
They published this series of essays, we know them as the Federalist Papers,
Right.
to explain and defend the Constitution. Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, writing under the pseudonym Publius,
Yeah.
they make this compelling case, arguing it's essential for national unity, stability, prosperity.
So they were very strategic.
Very much so.
What about the anti-federalists? They didn't just go away, did they?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
You've got figures like Patrick Henry, Samuel Bryan.
Okay.
They're leading this opposition,
Okay.
raising some valid concerns. I mean, the potential for tyranny,
Right.
erosion of state sovereignty,
Right.
lack of explicit protections for individual rights.
And that resonated with a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Right.
Right. Who were wary of centralized power, fiercely protective of their local autonomy.
It's such a fundamental debate.
It is.
It goes to the core of like, what is government?
Yeah.
How did they get past it?
Well, the Anti-Federalists, despite their arguments, they were unable to prevent ratification.
Right.
But their efforts were not in vain. I mean, they forced the Federalists to make concessions. Most significantly, the promise to add a Bill of Rights.
The Bill of Rights.
Which becomes,
Yeah.
this cornerstone of American democracy.
Right, right. So the Constitution gets ratified, new government takes shape.
Right.
But this whole debate about the balance of power doesn't just go away, does it?
No.
That tension is baked in.
Right into the fabric of our republic. I mean, it becomes a source of both strength and conflict,
Right.
as we see throughout American history. But I think, as Ellis suggests, this ongoing tension ensures this constant dialogue about the role of government.
Right.
Right? The rights of individuals. It's
Yeah.
part of what makes our democracy so dynamic.
And messy.
Yeah.
All right. So that brings us to the final chapter of this Second American Revolution.
Right.
What happens to this quartet?
Yeah.
Once the Constitution's ratified,
Uh-huh.
the new government's in place,
Mm.
do they ride off into the sunset?
Not at all.
It's remarkable how the addition of the Bill of Rights becomes so crucial. It really highlights just how much people were afraid of tyranny at that time.
Well, coming out of a revolution against a king, I mean, it's understandable that they would be cautious about giving too much power to any central authority.
And the Bill of Rights addresses that
Yeah.
with those specific guarantees.
Uh-huh.
What I find fascinating is how Madison, who initially saw a Bill of Rights as unnecessary,
Right.
he ends up being its champion.
Yeah.
What do you think causes that shift for him?
Well, I think Madison was a pragmatist.
Yeah.
He recognized that while the Constitution as written limited federal power,
Right.
this absence of specific protections
Yeah.
was a major obstacle to ratification.
Right.
So by championing the Bill of Rights, he kind of disarms the anti-federalists,
Uh-huh.
and it fosters this sense of unity
Okay.
around this new government. So it's a really savvy political move.
He turns a weakness into a strength.
Yeah, I think so.
This symbol of,
Uh-huh.
okay, both sides can kind of get behind this.
And I think it's worth noting,
Yeah.
even while advocating for this Bill of Rights,
Mm-hmm.
Madison was still trying to subtly shift the balance of power
Towards
to the federal government.
Really?
He tried to include this provision
Okay.
that would have given the federal government a veto over state laws
Interesting.
But that ultimately failed.
It shows just how committed he was.
Absolutely.
To a strong national government.
Yeah, even as he's making concessions.
Right, to get the thing passed.
To get it ratified.
So the Constitution is ratified.
Yep.
We have a new government.
Yes.
What happens to the Quartet?
They don't ride off into the sunset.
I didn't think so.
They each play a critical role in ensuring the success of this new government.
In what way?
I mean, Washington as the first president, he sets this precedent for leadership.
Okay.
And, executive power.
Right.
Hamilton as Secretary of the Treasury, he implements this bold financial plan that stabilizes the nation's economy.
It's remarkable how they all take on these key roles.
And Madison, of course, the architect of the Constitution, he's serving in the first Congress.
Right.
Helping shape the legislative agenda, ensuring that things are running smoothly.
And Jay's on the Supreme Court.
That's right, the first Chief Justice.
Right.
He plays a vital role in defining what is the judiciary's role.
Wow.
In this new republic and setting precedents that continue to shape our legal system today.
So they really were instrumental in these early years.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, each member of this quartet uses their talents and their experience to really lay the foundation for this stable, functioning nation.
It's a pretty amazing legacy.
It is.
Orchestrating a second American Revolution.
Right.
Not through military might, but through political maneuvering.
Ideas.
Debate, compromise.
Yeah.
Shared vision.
It's remarkable.
What, for you, is their most significant contribution?
I think it's their ability to recognize the shortcomings of the articles.
Yeah.
And to find a path forward, however difficult, however contentious, towards a system that has, for the most part, stood the test of time.
Right.
They were able to put aside their differences, compromise, and ultimately create a framework for a government that, despite its flaws, has proven remarkably resilient.
Right.
It's a testament to their vision, their commitment, and their willingness to really navigate these complexities of nation building.
And it reminds us that this isn't a simple narrative.
Oh, no.
It's complicated, competing ideas.
Absolutely.
But ultimately a shared belief that we can create a better future.
Yeah, a more perfect union.
The Quartet really is a fascinating look at this period.
It is.
A reminder that history is messy.
Yeah.
And we're still grappling with some of these same questions today.
Absolutely.
If you want to learn more, pick up a copy of the Quartet.
Yeah.
There's a link in the show notes.
Yeah.
And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the books and ideas that shape our world.
Keep those minds mindful.
We'll see you next time.